I want to start today with a number that, well, it didn't just stop me in my tracks. It fundamentally changed how I look at a weather forecast.
Oh, I think I know the one you're talking about.
We're doing a deep dive into a book called Nomad Century by Gaia, and right out of the gate, she hits you with this statistic. For every single degree Celsius, the temperature rises.
1 billion people.
1 billion people are pushed outside the zone where humans have, lived for thousands of years.
It's a number that is almost too big to wrap your head around. 1 billion people per degree. And just to frame this, we aren't talking about people just needing to turn up the air conditioning.
No, not at all.
We are talking about the fundamental displacement of a massive percentage of the human species.
Right, and that brings us to the core and honestly pretty radical premise of this book. Usually when we talk about climate change, the conversation is about mitigation. How do we stop it?
How do we save the ice caps? Yeah.
But Vince takes a totally different angle. She's essentially saying, okay, the warming is happening, the map is breaking, now how do we survive the shuffle?
Exactly. She reframes the entire narrative. In her view, migration isn't the problem.
It's the solution.
It is the solution. In fact, she argues it's the only viable adaptation strategy left for us.
Which is a tough pill to swallow because migration is always framed as a crisis, a failure. But she's calling this a species emergency, and she has this concept, the death of the latitude. Can we unpack that? Because it sounds like the title of a sci-fi horror movie, but she means it quite literally.
She does. To understand it, you have to get your head around the human climate niche. For the last, 6,000 years, most of humanity has lived in a very specific band of temperature and precipitation.
It's where our crops grow,
Yeah.
where our bodies work best.
Precisely.
Right.
But because of the warming we've already locked in, that niche is, well, it's on the move.
Moving how fast?
The data Vince cites is incredible. The habitable niche is moving polewards, so away from the equator, at a speed of about 115 centimeters per day.
Hold on. 115 centimeters a day, that doesn't sound like much. I mean, a snail moves faster.
Sure, if you look at it over a minute. But think about it geographically. If you are standing still, your climate is literally walking away from you every single day.
So over a decade, that's kilometers. Over a century.
That's entire countries.
Yeah.
And the driver isn't just heat in the abstract. It's specifically something called the wet bulb temperature.
I'm seeing this term pop up more and more. Wet bulb. It sounds technical, but the reality is pretty visceral. It's about sweat.
Right. It's about the physics of the human body. We cool ourselves by sweating. The sweat evaporates and takes heat with it. But if the air is hot and humid enough, it becomes saturated.
So it can't absorb any more water.
It literally cannot. So your sweat doesn't evaporate. It just sits there.
You're boiling in your own skin.
You are cooking from the inside out. The threshold she points to is 35 degrees Celsius wet bulb. At that point, even a fit, healthy person sitting in the shade with unlimited water will die in about 6 hours.
It's a biological hard limit.
A hard limit. And her data shows that at 4 degrees of warming, the tropics act peat. Huge chunks of Africa, Asia, the Americas, Australia cross this threshold for significant parts of the year.
So that's the heat element. But she talks about the 4 horsemen. It's not just hot. The whole system goes haywire. Fire, drought, flood.
The fire section is particularly disturbing, I think, because it highlights these feedback loops we're triggering. She talks about zombie fires in the Arctic.
I remember reading that and thinking, okay, now we're just making up scary terms, but explain what that actually is.
It's terrifyingly real. These are fires in the Arctic peatlands. Peat is, super carbon-rich soil. These fires burn underground through the winter.
Under the snow.
Right. They smolder beneath the snow and ice, protected from the cold, just eating away at the carbon in the soil. Then when spring comes and the snow melts, they burst back out.
So the ground itself is burning, releasing carbon that's been trapped for millennia, which creates more warming, which moves the climate niche even faster.
Exactly. It's a compounding cycle. And this leads to the expansion of the subtropical zone by about 1,000 kilometers. She uses the analogy that London is going to start feeling like Barcelona.
Which, I'll be honest, my first reaction is, well, better wine, better weather, what's the problem? But then you realize, if London becomes Barcelona...
What does Barcelona become?
Barcelona becomes the Sahara. That is the push. The death of latitude means the equatorial band effectively shuts down for human business.
So we have a clear problem. Billions of people cannot stay where they are. But this is where the deep dive gets really interesting. The other side of the equation. Where do they go? Vince calls it the new north. This is the part where the book forces you to completely redraw your mental map. We think of the Arctic, Siberia, Greenland as, the desolate edge of the world.
Frozen wastelands?
Right. But she's arguing they're about to become the premium real estate of the 21st century. It's a total geopolitical inversion. As the equator burns, the high latitudes heat up. Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, is already seeing this. They're growing potatoes, radishes, broccoli.
I saw that. And on paper, it sounds great. Greenland becomes green. But I have to play the skeptic here. I mean, you can't just move 1 billion people to the Canadian Shield and expect it to be a paradise.
You are absolutely right. And to her credit, she doesn't sugarcoat this at all. It's not going to be a paradise. It's going to be a lifeboat. And there are huge problems. For one, the soil.
There is no soil, right? It's just rock.
Just rock. Or worse, it's permafrost.
And when permafrost melts, it doesn't turn into nice farmland, does it?
No, it turns into sludge. It destabilizes everything. Roads buckle, buildings sink. We're already seeing this in Russian Arctic cities. Plus, you have the polar night. You can change the temperature, but you can't change the tilt of the Earth.
So you're still talking about months of total darkness? The psychological toll must be massive.
It will be. But her argument is that, compared to a literal death zone at the equator, dealing with mud and darkness is an engineering challenge, not a biological impossibility.
Okay, that makes sense.
And there are economic upsides, too. The Northwest Passage opening up. That cuts shipping times between Europe and Asia by 40%. Russia is positioned to become the world's agricultural superpower. The pull of the North is going to be just as strong as the push from the South.
Okay, so we have the push and the pull. But here's the hurdle that I think most people, and honestly, most politicians are going to trip over. Moving billions of people into countries that are currently, let's say, very protective of their borders. How does she possibly justify that as politically realistic?
This is the most controversial part of the book, but it's also the most data-driven. She argues that this migration isn't charity. It's not the North helping the poor South. She argues the North needs these people to survive its own crisis.
Which is
demographic collapse.
the empty nurseries concept.
Exactly. I mean, look at the stats. Spain and Japan are expected to see their populations halve by 2100. Halve. Europe's working-age population is dropping by 1/3. That is a slow-motion economic crash.
Catastrophic. Who pays for the pensions? Who staffs the hospitals?
Who drives the economy? Vince argues we have a top-heavy North with practically no young people and a South that is young and vibrant but has no safe land.
So it's a puzzle piece fit. The North needs labor, the South needs safety.
Precisely. Migration boosts GDP. It is not a zero-sum game. But, of course, you mentioned the political hurdle, the fear of replacement.
Right. People aren't just economic units. They have cultures, languages. The fear isn't just, will I have a job? It's, will my country still be my country?
And Vince tackles this by looking at history. She argues that culture isn't static. It evolves through complexity. She uses the example of the Paleo-Eskimos in Canada. They isolated themselves completely to preserve their way of life.
And they went extinct.
Her point is that isolation leads to stagnation. In a world of rapid change, the North needs the dynamism of the South just to keep the lights on.
Okay. Let's assume for a second that we get the politics sorted. The logistics of this are, brain melting is the only word I have. She says we need to build the equivalent of a 1 million-person city every 10 days.
For 80 years.
Every 10 days. How is that physically possible? I've seen how long it takes to fix a pothole in my neighborhood. How do we build instant cities?
Well, we can't do it with current methods. We can't use concrete. Concrete is too heavy, too slow, and the carbon footprint is massive. About 8% of global CO2 comes from cement.
So if we house the world in concrete, we just cook the planet faster.
We do. So the alternative she talks about is ply scrapers.
Right.
Cross-laminated timber, or CLT. Basically super-engineered wood.
Yeah.
It's fire-resistant, which sounds strange for wood, but it chars on the outside and protects the core. It locks in carbon. And crucially, it's light and modular.
So you can prefabricate entire apartment blocks in a factory and just
assemble them on site like Lego. She points to the pandemic as a proof of concept, how China built those emergency hospitals in a matter of days. We have the technology, but the design matters too. We can't just build sprawl. She highlights the concept of high-density, 15-minute cities.
And she used Parla, Spain, as a case study for this. I looked this up. It's basically a suburb of Madrid. Why is this the model?
Because Parla faced a massive influx of migrants, but it didn't collapse into a ghetto. And the reason was connectivity. It was linked by high-speed trains and trams to the economic heart of Madrid.
So people could get to jobs. It wasn't an island.
Exactly. Vince's point is that if we build these new cities in Siberia or Canada, they cannot be isolated refugee camps. They have to be integrated economic hubs.
So we have the materials, we have the design, but now we have to talk about the land itself. And this is where Vince goes from radical economist to political revolutionary. She talks about the end of Westphalian sovereignty.
This is probably the deepest theoretical shift in the book. Since 1648, our entire world map has been based on the idea of the nation-state. A fixed territory, a permanent population, one government.
Like a homeowner. This is my house, my land, I make the rules.
Exactly. But Vince argues that in a world where the climate niche moves 115 centimeters a day, the homeowner model is obsolete. We need to move to a renter model.
The land stays put, but the tenants need to be able to move.
Yes. This leads to the idea of charter cities. And I have to admit, when I read this part, it sounded like pure fantasy. She paints a picture of Nigeria struggling with heat leasing a chunk of land inside Russia for 99 years.
It sounds wild.
It does. But is it unprecedented? Think about the lease of Hong Kong. Think about the U.S. purchasing Alaska, or special economic zones that exist all over the world today.
But you really think a country like Russia is going to just rent out a province to a foreign nation?
Under current politics? Probably not. But Vince is looking at the alternative. If Russia has vast empty lands and a collapsing economy from a lack of labor, and the alternative is a chaotic armed invasion of desperate refugees, well, the calculus might change.
So the host nation maintains sovereignty, they get rent, they get economic activity.
But the city itself is administered by the migrating nation. So you could have a city in Siberia where the street signs are in Yoruba, the laws are Nigerian, but the land is Russian. It decouples the nation from the soil.
It's a fascinating concept. But it would require some kind of global body to manage this, right?
A UN migration organization with actual teeth. We manage global trade with binding rules. We manage air travel. But migration is the Wild West. She argues we need binding quotas, a system to manage the flow of humanity like a logistical challenge, not a war.
And that brings us to the two futures she outlines, because ultimately this deep dive is about a choice. We have future A and future B.
Future A is chaotic flight. It's pretty much the path we are on now. We build walls, we militarize borders, the equator becomes a death zone, billions of people surge north in desperation.
The climate apartheid scenario.
Yes. The rich buy bunkers in New Zealand, which is actually happening, and the poor are left to the heat. But the catch is, in this scenario, the North collapses too. Their economies fail because they don't have the workers. Their pension systems crash. It's a lose-lose.
And future B is managed retreat.
Managed retreat is the Nusantara model. Indonesia is moving its capital because Jakarta is sinking. They aren't waiting for the city to be underwater. They are building the new one now.
So we do that globally. We issue visas before the disaster strikes.
We build the fly scrapers before the refugees arrive. We create a global commonwealth where citizens have rights that aren't tied to a thinking badge of dirt.
It implies a level of global cooperation we have never, ever seen. It's optimistic, almost to a fault.
It is. But she keeps coming back to the fact that the bottleneck is in physics. We have the GMO crops, we have the desalination tech, we have the timber. The bottleneck is our imagination.
Our political imagination. We're trying to solve a 21st century species emergency with a 17th century political map.
That's it, exactly.
So if I'm listening to this, sitting in my house, maybe in a zone that's going to get hot, or maybe in a zone that's going to get crowded, what is the takeaway for me?
The takeaway is that the map you learned in school is dead. It's obsolete. Whether you are the one moving or the one receiving the movers, your life is going to change. The very concept of home is going to become much more fluid.
It's weird because Nomad Century implies we are going back to something primitive. But she frames it as an evolution.
And that's the thought that really sticks with me. We think of settling down as the peak of civilization. You build a house, you build a fence, you stay put. But for 99% of human history, we were migrants. We moved with the seasons, with the food.
So staying in one place is actually the weird part.
It's the anomaly. Sedentary life is just a blip in our history. Vince is suggesting that to survive the next century, we have to reclaim that heritage. We have to learn how to be nomads again.
Wow.
The question she leaves us with is this: are you ready to detach your identity from your geography?
That is a massive question to chew on. Can you be you if you aren't here? Nomad Century is definitely a book that shakes the foundations. Thanks for helping us unpack it.
My pleasure. It's a lot to think about.